About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major city in the US. I've always been a night person, so I would always find myself bored after my roommate, who was decidedly not a night person, went to sleep. To pass the time, I used to go for long walks and spend the time thinking. I spent 4 years like that, walking alone at night. I never once had a reason to feel afraid. I always used to joke with my roommates that even the drug dealers in the city were polite. But all of that changed in just a few minutes one evening. It was a Wednesday, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning, and I was walking near a police-patrolled park, quite a ways from my apartment. It was a quiet night, even for a weeknight, with very little traffic and almost no one on foot. The park, as it was most nights, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street in order to loop back to my apartment when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street, on my side, was the silhouette of a man dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say he was dance walking, headed straight for me. Deciding he was probably drunk, I stepped as close as I could to the road to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass me. The closer he got, the more I realized how gracefully he was moving. He was very tall and lanky, and wearing an old suit. He danced closer still, until I could make out his face. His eyes were open wide and wild, head tilted back slightly, looking off at the sky. His mouth was formed in a painfully wide cartoon of a smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he danced any closer. I took my eyes off of him to cross the empty street. As I reached the other side, I glanced back, and then stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot in the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me, but still looking skyward, smile still wide on his lips. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again, but kept my eyes on the man. He didn't move. Once I had put about half a block between us, I turned away from him for a moment to watch the sidewalk in front of me. The street and sidewalk ahead of me were completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to where he had been standing to find him gone. For the briefest of moments, I felt relieved, until I noticed him. He had crossed the street, and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance and the shadows, but I was certain he was facing me. I had looked away from him for no more than 10 seconds, so it was clear that he had moved fast. I was so shocked that I stood there for some time, staring at him. And then he started moving towards me again. He took giant, exaggerated tiptoed steps, as if he were a cartoon character sneaking up on someone, except he was moving very, very quickly. I'd like to say at this point I ran away, or pulled out my pepper spray, or my cell phone, or anything at all. But I didn't. I just stood there, completely frozen, as the smiling man crept towards me. And then he stopped again, about a car length away from me, still smiling his smile, still looking to the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurred out the first thing that came to my mind. What I meant to ask was, "What the fuck do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone. What came out was a whimpering, "What the fuck?" Regardless of whether or not humans can smell fear, they can certainly hear it. I heard it in my own voice, and that only made me more afraid. But he didn't react at all. He just stood there, smiling. And then, after what felt like forever, he turned around, very slowly, and started dance walking away. Just like that, Not wanting to turn my back to him again, I just watched him go, until he was far enough away to almost be out of sight. And then I realized something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor was he dancing. I watched in horror as the distant shape of him grew larger and larger. He was coming back my way, and this time he was running. I ran too. I ran until I was off a side road and back onto a better lit road with sparse traffic. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be found. The rest of the way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see his stupid smile. But he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 months after that night, and I never went out for another walk. There was something about his face that always haunted me. He didn't look drunk. He didn't look high. He looked completely and utterly insane. And that's a very, very scary thing to see.
We're a small family of 4. The 2 of us and 2 kids. 4 and 3 years old. My daughter is the older one, and for the last year has had nightmares off and on. Some mornings I'll wake up with her wedged firmly in between my wife and I, which is fine. We've all been there. I have no problem with it. What I do have a problem with is when she walks in 20 minutes after we turns the lights off and the house is dark, just to stand next to my bed on my side and stare at me. I get this sensation that I'm not alone and wake up with a dark little silhouette right next to my face. Although at times it sends me into a slight panic, or at least leaves me with a slight chill. I'll break the silence. "Yes, sweetie?" She usually asks me if I'm awake and tell me she had bad dreams. I'll let her climb into bed with us at that point, and that's the end of it. Well, last night, the same thing happened. I got the uneasy feeling I wasn't alone. My eyelids opened and there she was again. A dark little silhouette mere inches from my face. "What is it, sweetie?" No response. Just silence. Then it clicked that both my kids were staying with my in-laws for the night. I no longer wonder why my daughter wants to sleep in our bed. I was able to reach up and flip on the light, but of course there was no one there. However, I look down the hallway and it's my daughter's room, and the silhouette is standing in the doorway and hasn't moved for the last hour. I think it's waiting for my daughter to come home.
There was a hunter in the woods, who, after a long day hunting, was in the middle of an immense forest. It was getting dark, and having lost his bearings, he decided to head in one direction until he was clear of the increasingly oppressive foliage. After what seemed like hours, he came across a cabin in a small clearing. Realizing how dark it had grown, he decided to see if he could stay there for the night. He approached and found the door ajar. Nobody was inside. The hunter flopped down on the single bed, deciding to explain himself to the owner in the morning. As he looked around, he was surprised to see the walls adorned by many portraits, all painted in incredible detail. Without exception, they appeared to be staring down at him, their features twisted into looks of hatred. Staring back, he grew increasingly uncomfortable. Making a conscious effort to ignore the many hateful faces, he turned to face the wall, and, exhausted, he fell into a restless sleep. Face down in an unfamiliar bed, he turned, blinking in unexpected sunlight. Looking up, he discovered that the cabin had no portraits, only windows.
A warning for my fellow travelers. If you ever have a layover in Philly overnight, don't spend the night at the economy motel. And if you absolutely must, steer clear of room 103. I was heading south to visit some family members for a few weeks, and unfortunately the only flight available included a 7-hour layover in Philadelphia. Not wanting to spend those hours huddled outside the airport, I rented the cheapest motel I could find, and took the shuttle over at about 11 p.m. The place was just about the shadiest looking motel I had ever seen, but it was a bed, right? I checked in and headed to my room, 103. Exhausted, I immediately collapsed onto the bed. A bit lumpy, but not terrible. Not bothering to take my contacts out, I closed my eyes and let my thoughts wander. I was yanked back to reality by a loud grumbling from my stomach. Right. The airline hadn't fed us. Annoyed, I dug around in my bag for one of those microwavable soup cups, which I had tossed into the room's microwave. As the microwave rattled away, I noticed a piece of paper wedged underneath it. I yanked it out and unfolded it. There were 2 words scribbled on it hastily. Don't look. Huh. Whatever. I tossed it aside and retrieved my soup. Feeling lonely, I hopped online to see if anyone was on. I was in luck. My long-distance boyfriend happened to be on Skype. I called him up and we chatted a while, trying to keep our voices down. Eventually, though, he said something that made me laugh, and I heard a muffled curse come from upstairs. Feeling guilty, I said my goodnights and ended the call, with the intention of getting a bit of rest before my next flight. As I lay in the now dark room, I noticed a thin stream of light coming from where the curtain didn't close completely. Annoyed, I got up to close it. I was almost at the window when I had heard it.
I can see into your bedroom.
The voice sent a chill up my spine. It was very quiet and high-pitched, like a child's. It was so soft I wasn't sure I had just imagined it. I shook my head and reached for the curtain.
I know you can hear me. I'm at your bedroom window, and I know you can hear me.
I jumped back as the shadow crossed the stream of light coming into my room. I definitely hadn't imagined it that time. There was a voice, directly outside my door. Someone was out there, looking in. I jumped back into the bed and pulled covers up to my chin.
I'm at your bedroom window. I know you can hear me. I can see in your bedroom. Are you listening to me? I know you can hear me. Come on, take a look. I'm at your bedroom window.
The taunting went on, rattling into my thoughts and leaving me paralyzed in fear. Suddenly, I had heard the tenant upstairs moving around again. Footsteps stomped over to the door above, and I heard muffled shouting. Hey, shut up down there. This isn't funny. I have work in 4 hours. The door upstairs slammed, and there was silence. I breathed a sigh of relief and leaned back against the pillow, determined to get some sleep.
I'm still out here. Come look out your window.
I sat straight up, heart pounding in my ears. The voice was back. It whispered on, repeating its mantra over and over again. I put my hands over my ears and rocked back and forth, trying to block out the sound, but it was no use. The longer I sat there, the louder it got, until I could hear it so clearly it sounded like it was right next to me. Frantic, I picked up the phone and dialed the police. Stammering and stuttering in fright, I managed to give them the information. Where I was, what was wrong. Please help, I'm scared. I didn't care if it was a prank at this point, my mind was reeling in terror. The officers assured me that they'd be over shortly to see what the issue was. I thanked them and hung up the phone. As soon as I did, silence descended over the room. It wasn't just that the voice stopped. No, utter silence filled the room. The air conditioner stopped, the street noises outside ceased, even the faint hum of electricity from the TV lights went away. It pressed on my ears, with the tangible heaviness that sends shivers through me. Next to me, my phone rang. The caller ID told me that it was the police station, calling me back. Cautiously, I picked it up and answered.
Hello? They aren't coming.
And every light went out, plunging the room into complete and total darkness.